Okay, so let's talk about mitigation strategies. So aside from the devices that people are looking at buying, you mentioned distancing, you mentioned, just distance being a strategy, and you also mentioned turning the power off to the device. So beyond those two things, so to me, the reason I would want a meter to be able to measure is to say, are there hot spots, particularly in my house, that I shouldn't sit in the morning and sit there all morning, right? And so maybe I move a chair over, or maybe I move the head of my bed away from a particular hot spot where that way I'm not sleeping in a hot spot per se. But what about paints, wall materials that you can put in inside the wall or et cetera? Are there other things that have been shown to be effective at shielding Wi-Fi or shielding EMFs in general?
Yes, for sure. Well, there's an order of priority to mitigation. I think the first line of defense is mitigating the bedroom, and that's more like starting to clean up sources. Because if you keep all the sources and then you get into shielding, you're kind of working backwards. First, try to not have a cell phone by your nightstand, or turn it off or put it on airplane mode. That's first. And that's just because of the compounding effect. If it impacts your sleep over time, this can be quite dramatic over a lifetime. So just to minimize the impact, make sure that in your bedroom there's no phone or laptop or tablet or Bluetooth sensors, Bluetooth alarm clocks. There's a lot of those these days. One study I saw talked about the amount of wireless devices in the average home, and one finding was 23 of them. So that's quite a lot. But I know that from experience, not personal experience, but from my colleagues who do EMF mitigation, one home had 150 different things in
Wow.
there because of the sensors. Some people go with the smart home idea and everything is Bluetooth, every lamp, the toaster and everything. And it causes a home that is quite distressing to the body, especially for people who have already other chronic issues going on. So bedroom is first. And then I would say, just to avoid the biggest risks that we know this technology can have on your body, don't put the phone to your ear. Use speaker phone or use a wired solution, wired headset. I'm not a fan of anything Bluetooth touching the body either for extended periods of time, for the same reason. Bluetooth might be low energy, and sometimes it is true, sometimes not. Generally speaking, it's less intense than a phone, but it's still not at levels that can be considered any safer. So you're replacing one bad thing with another bad thing, essentially with Bluetooth. And the latest trend is Bluetooth earbuds. I must say that's a very alarming trend, because we barely have any data on Bluetooth. What we have in the determination, the class 1 carcinogenicity classification I told you about from top epidemiologists, this pertains to mostly 2G and 3G studies. Now we've moved with phones that have a Wi-Fi antenna, a Bluetooth antenna, and a 5G or 4G LTE antenna in there. And the Bluetooth earbuds are also deeper into the brain. And we have barely any studies on Bluetooth technology in itself. So our ability to study this stuff is so slow. It's a snail pace compared to our ability to, fast track all new technologies moving forward. So the argument that we should wait for determination of harm before taking action is pretty stupid in the end, because it will never happen. I don't think we're going to have EMF studies that are pre-market, because right now everything is post-market, and post in a way that is dramatic. So when you have mitigated the bedroom and mitigated the devices that are touching your body, also you can consider more advanced strategies such as shielding. And there are good reasons to think that people who suffer from autoimmune issues or other chronic issues would be better off sleeping in a room that does not have these exposures coming from the exterior. Because yes, you can turn off your own phone, you can turn off Wi-Fi at night, you can start using an Ethernet cable to connect your computer instead of Wi-Fi, and all these things are great. But what do you do against cell towers or neighbors that have Wi-Fi? You're always exposed to some degree, especially in cities, to this external sources of radio frequency. So what some people do, and that's a more advanced strategy that is quite an investment of time and money, is to completely shield the bedroom, either with a bed canopy over the bed, or the use of EMF blocking paint that is grounded, and then there's something over windows, either a film or some sort of fabric that is EMF blocking. So these strategies can be applied, and some doctors in environmental medicine recommend these strategies to patients, especially those who they find are the most electrosensitive. And how do they determine that? One, I wouldn't say easy, but relatively easy way to determine how electrosensitive you might personally be is to really get out of your usual environment. And doctors recommend this EMF vacation that they called. Really just go camping without your devices for 7 days and see how you feel. If you have the same diet, maybe you follow an autoimmune diet or a gluten-free diet, and you have a certain digestion that you have certain energy levels and a baseline in your normal environment, just keep a journal and see if you feel much better camping. If you don't, then maybe your environment is not that much of a problem. Maybe then you need to look at your diet and other things that you have control over. But some people sleep much better, and maybe their brain fog lifts, or they see other symptoms start to vanish after a few days, which shows them that not necessarily EMF is the culprit here, but their environment. So it might be work stress, it might be mold, it might be chemicals, maybe it's all of them. But EMF is part of the factors that is often overlooked.
Yeah, it's a new factor, and one that you're right. People oftentimes skip that part or don't want to give up the great conveniences,
Yeah.
or benefits of using the technology. We were talking earlier about permeability factors associated with EMF, like leaky blood-brain barrier. Can you speak to that as a consequence of exposure?
For sure. Yeah, the link about the blood-brain barrier, radio frequency, and especially microwave back in the 1970s was being studied because military personnel were exposed very close to radars. Radars, in case people didn't know, it's also microwave radiation, like a cell phone tower, except it's quite strong. Sometimes it's stronger than a cell phone tower. And these people were working either, you're working in a submarine or working in different military bases where you have strong radars. And these operators were reporting, I don't feel well and there's something wrong. So this is where the early military research were starting to be done, because the military was interested to have troops that are combat ready, and they found that there are health effects. And to this day, this is still a line that's being studied. But right away, Alan Frey is the researcher, Frey, and he found an effect on the blood-brain barrier. And what he found is that when you are exposed, even at an extremely low level, there seems to be the blood-brain barrier is more permeable. So a sort of leaky blood-brain barrier. But to this day, we don't know what the clinical implications of that are, and it's been reproduced by different scientists. So I saw a discussion a few weeks ago, because I tend to be in different groups of discussion with scientists, and they said we still have no idea what the implications are. Does it mean that you're that much more likely to develop Alzheimer's, or is there a link with different neuropsychiatric effects? We don't know exactly, but some researchers have the hypothesis that if it can impact the porosity of such a delicate barrier as the blood-brain barrier, what does it do to the gut barrier? And what does it do to other barriers, such as the testicular barrier that I didn't know existed? But you have barriers around very sensitive organs that are so thin and can easily be disrupted by changes in the environment, and even by chemicals for that matter. So it's still speculative at this point, but it's really a big question in my mind of how much radio frequency radiation is contributing to gut permeability, because a lot of the younger generation, me included, I rarely talk on the phone like this. I will text, and when I text, I bring the phone back to my navel, and would be texting over my heart or over my gut. And if it's contributing to gut permeability, then it means that it's not only the chemicals that might be opening our gut, but the radio frequency radiation, in which case it would be very, very smart for anyone who wants to keep a good immunity or even heal from certain autoimmune issues to avoid these exposures as much as possible.
Yeah. Have you come across studies or research? You're talking about talking about leaky gut as a potential. Leaky brain is something that's been more studied. But what about, and you mentioned the testes, so what about like sperm quality or fertility? I know a lot of people also carry their cell phones in their front pockets or
For
in their
sure.
back pockets, which is, proximity to, to the sex organs. Have you seen anything in the research, discussing that as a topic?
Yeah, especially in the last decades, the Cleveland Clinic fertility unit were really the pioneers studying cell phones in pockets of all people. So very mainstream, science, very prestigious institution. And they got some flack over these early studies, but it's been reproduced by several groups. So now the data on fertility and fertility loss or a decrease in sperm quality in men who keep a phone in the pocket is quite strong. In fact, you had Dr. Andrew Huberman, that's in the news everywhere on social media. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford. He reviewed the data on cell phones in the pocket and fertility. And he argues that the impact is even more credible and that the data is even stronger compared to BPA. And what people know, they know, everything is BPA free these days, and these plastics are an endocrine disruptor, so they're acting on our hormones and they're disrupting our ability to have the right hormones in our body. Well, it turns out that radio frequency radiation, even if it's hard to, I guess, wrap your head around that because it's not a chemical, but it has this electrical effect that is also an endocrine disruptor. So it is quite sad that to this day, these studies at the Cleveland Clinic were, again, 2008, 15 plus years ago, some of them 20 years old. And we had early indications. And yes, we needed more data. But to this day, most people still keep a phone in their pocket. The right behavior would be to, when you put it in your pocket, it's on airplane mode. And when you arrive at the office or you're in any situation where you're not, on the go, you could just put it in front of you. And it doesn't seem like a lot, right? Some people would ask, well, what's the difference between, my phone is at 2 feet or, right next to my genitalia? There's a huge difference. At 2 feet, the intensity drops by 90% already. So, keeping your phone not on your person might be one of your top priorities when it comes to mitigation for that reason.
That was my next question to you. What's you said 90% reduction 2 feet away.
Yeah.
Um, where do you get 100% reduction? Is it 3 feet? Do you know? Has anybody studied that?
A higher, sorry, what was it? 80%
A
reduction?
100%. Where do you get
100%?
100%? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you never get 100% reduction because the signal goes in time and space. I think if I understand the electromagnetic physics right, but to get no effect, that's the hard question. How far from your phone would you need to go to get zero effect on fertility? That's the right question. We don't have the determination of what are safe levels. The closest we have to what could be biologically compatible or safe levels is from the Bio Initiative report, and that's a collective of independent scientists that have been publishing on the topic, and they've put forward certain guidelines, but the problem is these levels are so low that we simply don't see how we could use cell phones at these levels at the moment. Maybe it could be possible in the future to engineer safe wireless technology, but I think we're not even there yet in the sense that the first the first thing to acknowledge is, okay, we have a problem, there's a stressor in the environment, and yes, we agree it's a problem. Then we could lower to the minimum amount possible what the cell phone emits. At the moment, this is not what's being done. In fact, some engineers claim that we could reduce the amount of radiation your phone emits by several fold, and it would still work fine. So why are companies emitting so much radiation? Well, they're not incentivized by the rules that, of course, are by the FCC. Beginning of this conversation, if the FCC says it's perfectly safe, cell phone companies are not incentivized in any way whatsoever to shield against the radiation going towards your body with certain technologies that still exist, that already exist. In fact, these patents exist, have been created in the 80s by Nokia. They've been shelved. We have all these patents there that are dormant. Why? Because they have no incentive to go with the minimum amount of radiation possible. So we need to start applying these principles. But for the moment, what we're facing is a technology where it's always maximum amount of radiation. Why? Because they want great connectivity, and this is what they sell to users, right? Your cell phone will always be working, so why not go to the maximum in that case?